Welcome, dear listeners, to another peaceful journey with Voyage to Dreamland. Tonight, we invite you to settle into your most comfortable position, perhaps pulling a soft blanket closer around your shoulders as we venture together into the gentle embrace of Grandmother's attic on a wonderfully cozy rainy day. Before we begin our restful exploration, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share with us your own memories of rainy days spent in quiet, peaceful spaces, perhaps an attic, a reading nook, or a favorite corner where time seemed to slow down and the world felt wonderfully small and safe. Your stories of comfort and tranquility help create this beautiful community of peaceful souls seeking rest. As the first drops of rain begin to tap against imaginary windows, allow yourself to release the tensions of the day. Let your breathing naturally slow and deepen, knowing that for the next few hours you have nowhere else to be but here, in this moment of perfect calm. The gentle rhythm of rainfall will be our companion as we climb the creaking wooden stairs to a place where memories live softly among dust motes dancing in filtered light. Tonight's journey takes us to that special sanctuary found beneath slanted roof beams where generations of stories wait patiently in trunks and boxes, where the scent of lavender sachets mingles with old wood and the whispered secrets of time itself. Here in Grandmother's attic, we'll discover that the most profound peace often comes not from grand adventures, but from the simple, tender moments that connect us to those who came before and the quiet wisdom they left behind. The afternoon rain begins as a whisper against the old farmhouse windows, each droplet carrying with it the promise of a day meant for indoor contemplations and gentle discoveries. Sarah finds herself drawn to the narrow staircase that leads to her grandmother's attic, a space she hasn't visited since childhood summers spent in this very house. The wooden steps creak beneath her feet with a familiar song, each note a memory preserved in the grain of well-worn oak. As she climbs, her hand trailing along the smooth banister, polished by decades of similar journeys, the sounds of the world below fade into a comfortable distance. The rain grows more insistent now, drumming a steady rhythm against the roof tiles just above her head, creating nature's own lullaby that seems to slow time itself. The stairway narrows as it rises, the walls closing in with a comforting embrace rather than confinement, leading her toward a doorway that glows softly with the pearl gray light of the storm-touched afternoon. The brass doorknob, tarnished with age and countless turnings, feels cool beneath her palm. As she turns it slowly, the mechanism clicks with the satisfying weight of old craftsmanship, and the door swings open on hinges that sigh like a contented breath. The attic reveals itself gradually, first as a shaft of muted light, then as a space that seems to exist outside of ordinary time, where the boundaries between past and present blur like watercolors in gentle rain. The air here carries stories in its very molecules. The faint sweetness of dried roses from sachets tucked into forgotten corners, the warm scent of old wood that has absorbed decades of summer heat and winter cold, and beneath it all, something indefinable that speaks of love, carefully preserved, and memories tenderly kept. The floorboards, wide planks of heart pine that have settled into perfect silence, stretch away into shadows that hold treasures yet to be rediscovered. Dust motes dance in the filtered light that streams through a small dormer window, each tiny particle caught in its own graceful ballet, rising and falling with air currents, so gentle they might be the breath of the house itself. The window, its glass rippled with age, and streaked with the afternoon's rain, frames a view of the garden below, where grandmother's roses bow their heads under the weight of accumulated droplets, their petals scattered like confetti across the wet grass. Within this sanctuary, beneath the eaves, the landscape of memory unfolds in careful arrangements that speak of a lifetime's accumulation of meaningful moments. Trunks of various sizes and vintages stand like patient sentinels, their leather straps and brass fittings dulled by time, but still sturdy, still protecting the treasures within. Some bear the marks of distant travels, hotel stickers from long ago honeymoons, shipping labels and faded ink that tell of journeys across oceans when travel was an elegant affair of steamer trunks and careful packing. A dressmaker's form stands in one corner, draped with a wedding dress. From an era when lace was made by hand, and every stitch carried the hopes of generations. The fabric, yellowed to the color of old ivory, still holds its shape with dignity, the bodice fitted to measurements that once defined a young woman's dreams. Beside it, a hatbox tower reaches toward the slanted ceiling, each circular container holding not just millinery, but entire seasons of social gatherings, church services, and special occasions when a lady never ventured out without the perfect hat to complete her ensemble. The rain continues, its gentle percussion overhead, each drop adding to the symphony of solitude that makes this space feel removed from the rushing world below. Here, time moves differently, measured not in minutes and hours, but in the slow accumulation of stories, in the patient gathering of objects that once held significance in daily life, but now serve as anchors to memory, keeping the past from drifting too far into the mists of forgetting. Wooden crates stacked against one wall contain books whose pages have grown soft with age, their spines faded but still readable in the dim light. These volumes speak of evenings spent by lamplight, of knowledge pursued for its own sake rather than for any practical purpose, of the luxury of reading simply for the joy of words well arranged and thoughts carefully preserved. Among them, journals bound in leather rest like sleeping birds, their pages filled with the careful handwriting of those who believed that thoughts worth thinking were worth recording, that the small observations of daily life might someday matter to someone yet unborn. A rocking chair sits near the window, its curved runners worn smooth by countless hours of gentle motion. The cushions, though faded, still hold the impression of bodies that found comfort here, of mothers who rocked babies to sleep while watching storms pass over the countryside, of grandmothers who mended clothes while keeping vigil over the changing seasons. The chair faces the window, as if still waiting for its occupant to return, to take up once again the peaceful rhythm of contemplation and care. Among the most tender treasures in this elevated sanctuary, quilts rest in cedar chests, like sleeping gardens, their patterns telling stories of communities gathered around quilting frames during long winter evenings. Each quilt represents countless hours of careful stitching, of conversation shared over needlework, of the patient art of creating beauty from scraps and remnants. The fabrics themselves carry histories, pieces cut from outgrown dresses, fragments of curtains that once graced parlor windows, squares salvaged from shirts worn thin by honest labor. One quilt, folded with tissue paper between its layers, bears the pattern known as wedding ring, its interlocking circles created from fabrics in every shade of blue imaginable. The stitching, tiny and precise, speaks of hands that understood the meditation inherent in repetitive motion, the peace that comes from creating something beautiful, stitch by careful stitch. The blue fabrics range from the pale gray blue of winter sky to the deep navy of midnight water, each piece chosen not just for its color but for its story, its connection to a moment in time when someone wore this fabric, lived in it, made memories, while clothed in its embrace. Another chest reveals a crazy quilt, its irregular patches joined with decorative embroidery that transforms necessity into artistry. Here, silk from an evening gown mingles with velvet from a gentleman's waistcoat, while ribbons and lace create delicate borders between sections. The embroidery work shows the influence of various hands, some stitches bold and confident, others delicate and tentative, suggesting that this quilt was a community effort, a gathering of women who brought their individual skills to create something greater than any could accomplish alone. The rain outside has settled into a steady rhythm now, neither urgent nor hesitant, but constant as a heartbeat, as reliable as the passage of seasons. It drums against the roof with a sound that seems designed specifically for moments like these, when the world contracts to the size of a single room and the pace of life slows to match the gentle cadence of falling water. The sound creates a cocoon of privacy, a sense that this attic exists in its own pocket of time, separate from the demands and distractions of the modern world below. Baby clothes rest in another chest, each tiny garment a testament to hope and preparation, to the careful attention paid to the smallest details when expecting new life. Christening gowns of white cotton and lace, their sleeves long enough to cover infant hands, their hems designed to trail gracefully over a mother's arms during the ceremony. Knitted booties in soft pastels, their wool still holding the faint scent of the sachets that protected them from moths and time. These garments, never worn or worn, only briefly, speak of the tender anticipation that surrounds new life, of the dreams invested in every stitch and seam. Vacation photographs capture moments of leisure and exploration, when families ventured beyond their familiar boundaries to experience new places and create memories that would be treasured long after the journey ended. Beach scenes show children building sand castles while parents watch from beneath striped umbrellas, their faces relaxed in ways that speak of temporary freedom from daily responsibilities. Mountain vistas frame tiny human figures, dwarfed by natural grandeur, reminders of both human insignificance and the courage required to seek out beauty in distant places. The attic's single window continues to frame the rain-washed world outside, where the garden has taken on the particular beauty that comes only during gentle storms. Colors appear more saturated when viewed through the filter of falling water. The green of leaves seems deeper, more essential, while flowers glow with an inner light that makes them appear almost luminous against the gray backdrop of the clouded sky. This view, unchanged in its essential elements for decades, provides a constant against which the treasures of memory can be measured and understood. In a corner where the afternoon light falls most gently, a collection of music boxes rests on a small table draped with embroidered linen. These delicate mechanisms, crafted in an era when entertainment was created rather than consumed, hold within their wooden and porcelain cases the power to transform silence into melody with the simple turn of a key. The largest box, fashioned from burled walnut with mother-of-pearl inlays, contains a tiny ballerina who still pirouettes with mechanical precision, her pink tutu faded but her grace undiminished by the passage of time. The melody that emerges when the key is wound speaks of European workshops where craftsmen understood that music should be as beautiful to hear as the boxes were to behold. Each note falls like a crystal droplet, pure and clear, creating a soundtrack for memories that dance just beyond the edge of conscious recollection. The tune, familiar yet impossible to name, carries with it the essence of childhood wonder, of moments when magic seemed not only possible but inevitable, when the boundary between the mechanical and the miraculous dissolved in the face of simple beauty. Smaller boxes cluster around their larger companion like children gathered around a storyteller. One, shaped like a miniature grand piano, plays a Chopin nocturne with a delicate precision that only the finest Swiss movements could achieve. Another, disguised as a jewelry casket lined with rose-colored silk, reveals its musical secret only when opened, surprising the listener with a waltz that seems to emerge from the very air itself. These instruments of gentle entertainment speak of evenings when families created their own amusement, when the simple act of winding a music box could transform an ordinary moment into something approaching the sublime. The rain outside has found its own rhythm now, a steady percussion that harmonizes perfectly with the mechanical melodies emerging from the opened boxes. Together, they create a symphony of solitude that seems designed specifically for this moment, this discovery, this gentle exploration of treasures that have waited patiently for attention. The sound of water against glass mingles with the crystalline notes of the music boxes, creating an atmosphere where time moves differently, where the urgent demands of the modern world fade into irrelevance. Among the music boxes, wind-up toys rest in various states of repose, their springs unwound, but their potential for motion preserved like sleeping energy waiting for activation. A tin soldier, his paint worn but his bearing still proud, stands ready to march across imaginary battlefields where conflicts are resolved through the simple expedient of running down rather than running out of ammunition. A dancing bear crafted from mohair and fitted with a tiny vest waits to perform his mechanical waltz for an audience that exists now only in memory, but whose applause still echoes in the careful preservation of these delicate entertainments. Books in the attic exist in a different category than those found in formal libraries or living room shelves. These volumes have been loved into softness, their pages turned by hands seeking comfort rather than information, their spines creased from multiple readings that brought solace during difficult times or joy during moments of leisure. Poetry collections rest beside cookbooks, their juxtaposition speaking to the understanding that nourishment comes in many forms, that the soul requires feeding just as surely as the body. A collection of children's books occupies one corner of a trunk, their bright illustrations still vivid despite the passage of decades. These stories, read aloud during countless bedtimes, carry within their pages the echoes of young voices asking for just one more chapter, just one more story before sleep. The margins bear the marks of small fingers that traced familiar words, learning to read by following along with beloved tales of adventure and wonder. Some pages show the gentle stains of tears shed over particularly moving passages, evidence of the deep emotional connections formed between young readers and the characters who became their companions. Religious texts and inspirational volumes cluster together, their pages marked with ribbons and pressed flowers that served as bookmarks for passages that provided particular comfort. These books show the wear patterns of regular consultation. Certain chapters opened more frequently than others, specific verses sought out during times of need or celebration. The margins contain penciled notes in various hands, evidence of multiple generations finding wisdom in the same words, each adding their own understanding to the accumulated knowledge preserved between these covers. Journals and diaries offer the most intimate glimpses into lives lived with attention to detail and appreciation for the small moments that comprise a full existence. Written in fountain pen ink that has faded from black to sepia, these personal records document not the grand events that make newspaper headlines, but the quiet observations that reveal character and perspective. Weather patterns receive careful attention, not just temperature and precipitation, but the quality of light on particular mornings, the way fog moves across fields, the first appearance of spring flowers pushing through late snow. The rain continues its gentle conversation with the roof, each drop a word in a language of comfort that needs no translation. The sound creates a sense of enclosure that feels protective rather than confining, as if the storm has wrapped the house in a blanket of privacy where memories can emerge without fear of judgment or interruption. In this cocoon of sound and solitude, the past feels not distant but simply quiet, waiting patiently for attention and recognition. Photograph albums rest in careful stacks, their pages separated by tissue paper that crackles softly when turned, releasing the faint scent of old adhesive and the metallic tang of silver halide prints. These images, captured in an era when photography required patience and intention, show not just faces but entire worlds. The careful arrangement of parlor furniture, the proud display of garden vegetables, the formal poses that were necessary when exposure times demanded stillness but somehow managed to capture genuine emotion despite their technical constraints. Wedding photographs occupy places of honor, the couples frozen in moments of hope and promise, their faces showing the particular combination of joy and solemnity that marks the beginning of shared life. The women's dresses, elaborate confections of silk and lace, speak of months of preparation and the understanding that this day would be remembered and referenced for decades to come. The men, uncomfortable in their formal wear but proud in their bearing, stand with the particular straightness that comes from knowing oneself to be at the center of an important moment. Family portraits reveal the evolution of fashion and custom across generations, but more importantly, they show the continuity of love and care that transcends changing styles and circumstances. Children appear in successive photographs, growing from babies held carefully in their mother's arms to young adults ready to begin their own families. The consistency of certain features, a particular shape of nose, a characteristic tilt of head, creates visual threads that connect past to present, showing how traits and tendencies flow through generations like water through familiar channels. Bundles of letters, tied with ribbons that have softened from bright silk to muted pastels, rest in a wooden box that once held cigars but now serves as a repository for communications that span decades of human connection. These letters, written when correspondence was an art form requiring patience and consideration, represent conversations conducted across distance and time, relationships maintained through the careful application of pen to paper and the faith that words could bridge any gap between hearts that truly wish to remain connected. The handwriting varies from letter to letter, some penned in the careful script taught in schools, where penmanship was considered as important as arithmetic, others flowing with the natural grace that comes from years of practice and the understanding that beautiful writing is itself a gift to the reader. The ink, faded now from deep black to various shades of brown and gray, still carries the personality of its writers. Bold strokes that speak of confidence and certainty, delicate loops that suggest sensitivity and care, hurried passages where emotion overcame the demands of perfect formation. Love letters occupy their own special section, their pages still faintly scented with the perfume applied by hands that understood the power of engaging multiple senses in the art of romantic communication. These missives, written during courtships conducted with all the formality and patience that modern relationships seem to have abandoned, reveal the careful progression of affection from polite interest to passionate devotion. The language, elevated beyond casual conversation, shows how the act of writing forced correspondents to consider their feelings carefully, to choose words that would accurately convey emotions too complex for casual expression. Letters from children away at school or starting their own families provide windows into the universal experience of growing up and growing away, of maintaining connections across the inevitable distances that separate generations. These communications, often beginning with apologies for delayed responses and ending with promises to write more frequently, capture the particular mixture of independence and homesickness that marks the transition from childhood to adulthood. The details they contain, descriptions of new friends, accounts of small adventures, requests for favorite recipes or family news, create portraits of lives being lived with attention to the connections that provide stability and meaning. The rain continues its gentle conversation with the roof and windows, creating a backdrop of sound that makes the attic feel even more removed from the world of electronic communication and instant connection. Here, surrounded by evidence of relationships maintained through patience and effort, the value of slow communication becomes apparent. These letters required time to write, time to travel, and time to be properly appreciated by their recipients, creating a rhythm of connection that allowed relationships to deepen gradually, like wine aging in carefully tended cellars. Linens and household textiles occupy several trunks, their careful folding and preservation speaking to an era when such items represented significant investments of time and money, when the creation of a proper household required years of patient accumulation and the understanding that quality items, properly cared for, could serve multiple generations. Tablecloths of Irish linen, their surfaces smooth as silk, from countless careful ironings, bear the subtle marks of special occasions, faint stains from holiday meals that no amount of washing could completely remove, but which serve now as reminders of gatherings where food was secondary to fellowship. Embroidered pillowcases rest in neat stacks, their edges decorated with flowers and vines worked in threads that still hold their color despite decades of washing and use. These pieces represent hours of evening work, of hands that found peace in the repetitive motion of needle through fabric, creating beauty that would be appreciated daily but never taken for granted. The patterns, some copied from magazines and others created from imagination, show the individual personality of their makers. Some preferring geometric precision while others favored the organic curves of natural forms. Doilies and antimacassars Those small guardians of furniture and fabric cluster together like a collection of paper snowflakes, each one unique in its pattern but united in its purpose of protecting more valuable items from the wear of daily use. These delicate creations, worked in cotton thread so fine it seems impossible that human hands could manipulate it with such precision, represent the understanding that beauty and practicality need not be mutually exclusive, that even the most utilitarian objects can be transformed into art through the application of skill and imagination. Kitchen linens tell their own stories of daily life lived with attention to detail and pride in presentation. Dish towels, their hems decorated with days of the week embroidery, speak of routines that brought order and meaning to domestic tasks. Pot holders, quilted and bound with care, show the wear patterns of hands that understood cooking to be an act of love rather than mere necessity. Aprons, from simple work versions to elaborate hostess styles, represent the understanding that appearance matters even in the most mundane activities. That taking pride in one's work begins with taking pride in one's presentation. The steady rhythm of rain against the attic windows creates a sense of timelessness that makes these domestic artifacts seem not outdated, but simply patient, waiting for a world that might once again value the careful attention to detail and quality that they represent. In this space, removed from the rush of modern convenience, the wisdom of creating things to last becomes apparent. The understanding that true economy lies not in buying cheaply, but in buying well and caring properly what one owns. Portrait photographs in ornate frames create a gallery of faces that once animated the rooms below, their expressions captured in moments of formal dignity that reveal character despite the constraints of early photographic technology. These images, taken when sitting for a photograph, was an event requiring special clothes and careful preparation. Show people at their most composed, their faces bearing the particular combination of seriousness and pride that comes from knowing oneself to be participating in a process that will preserve one's appearance for future generations to study and remember. The frames themselves tell stories of changing tastes and economic circumstances, some elaborate confections of carved wood and gilt that speak of prosperity and the desire to display it. Others simple and elegant in their restraint, suggesting either modest means or sophisticated understanding that the photograph itself should be the focus of attention. The glass, some pieces original and others replacements added over the years, bears the minor scratches and spots that come from decades of careful cleaning and occasional accidents. Each mark a small chapter in the ongoing story of preservation and care. Children appear in many of the photographs, their faces showing the particular solemnity that came from being told to hold perfectly still for the duration of the exposure. Yet even within these constraints, personality emerges, the slight tilt of a head that suggests curiosity, the barely suppressed smile that speaks of natural joy, the protective stance of an older sibling standing behind a younger one. These images capture not just physical appearance, but the essence of character, the qualities that made each individual memorable to those who loved them. Wedding portraits occupy places of special honor, the couples frozen in moments of hope and commitment that would be tested by decades of shared experience. The elaborate dress and formal poses required by the technology of the time create an atmosphere of ceremony and importance that modern casual photography rarely achieves. These images speak of marriages entered into with full understanding of their permanence, of commitments made not just between individuals, but between families and communities that would support and witness the unfolding of shared lives. The rain outside continues its gentle percussion, creating a soundtrack that makes the examination of these preserved faces feel like a sacred act, a communion with those who once walked through the rooms below, who climbed these same stairs, who perhaps sat in this very attic, sorting through their own collections of memory and meaning. The sound of water against glass creates a barrier between present and past that somehow makes the past feel more accessible, as if the rain has washed away the intervening years and made direct communication possible across the boundaries of time. Holiday decorations rest in careful storage, their bright colors muted by tissue paper and time, but their capacity for transformation undiminished by years of patient waiting. Christmas ornaments, each one wrapped individually and nested in boxes that have themselves become part of the tradition, represent decades of holiday celebrations, of trees decorated with the accumulated treasures of many seasons. Glass baubles and jewel tones catch what light filters through the rain-streaked window, their surfaces reflecting not just the present moment, but the glow of countless Christmas mornings when they transformed ordinary evergreen branches into objects of wonder and delight. Handmade ornaments occupy their own special category, their imperfect charm, speaking to the understanding that the most meaningful decorations are those created with love rather than purchased with money. Paper angels, their edges softened by time, still bear the careful coloring applied by small hands, guided by patient adults who understood that the process of creation was as important as the final product. Felt stockings, their surfaces decorated with sequins and beads applied with more enthusiasm than precision, wait to be hung once again by chimneys that may no longer draw properly, but still serve as focal points for family gatherings and gift exchanges. Easter decorations cluster together in their own container, their pastel colors speaking of spring celebrations and the renewal that comes with changing seasons. Artificial flowers, their silk petals, still bright despite decades of storage, represent the desire to bring the beauty of spring indoors, to create environments that celebrate the return of life and growth after winter's dormancy. Egg decorating supplies, their dyes long dried, but their potential for creativity undiminished, speak of kitchen tables transformed into art studios, where families gathered to create beauty from simple materials and shared time. Halloween costumes, carefully preserved in garment bags, represent the particular joy that comes from temporary transformation, from the freedom to become someone or something else for a brief, magical evening. These outfits, some homemade with loving attention to detail, and others store-bought but modified with personal touches, speak of the importance of imagination in daily life, of the understanding that play and creativity are not luxuries, but necessities that feed the soul and strengthen family bonds. The rain outside has settled into the kind of steady rhythm that makes indoor activities feel not just appropriate, but necessary, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of quiet exploration that reveals the true value of preserved memories. In this atmosphere of gentle enclosure, surrounded by evidence of celebrations past and future, the cyclical nature of human joy becomes apparent. The understanding that happiness is not a destination, but a series of moments, carefully created and lovingly remembered. Handmade ornaments occupy their own special category, their imperfect charm speaking to the understanding that the most meaningful decorations are those created with love rather than purchased with money. Paper angels, their edges softened by time, still bear the careful coloring applied by small hands, guided by patient adults who understood that the process of creation was as important as the final product. Felt stockings, their surfaces decorated with sequins and beads, applied with more enthusiasm than precision, wait to be hung once again by chimneys that may no longer draw properly, but still serve as focal points for family gatherings and gift exchanges. Easter decorations cluster together in their own container, their pastel colors speaking of spring celebrations and the renewal that comes with changing seasons. Artificial flowers, their silk petals still bright despite decades of storage, represent the desire to bring the beauty of spring indoors, to create environments that celebrate the return of life and growth after winter's dormancy. Egg decorating supplies, their dyes long dried, but their potential for creativity undiminished, speak of kitchen tables transformed into art studios where families gathered to create beauty from simple materials and shared time. Halloween costumes carefully preserved in garment bags represent the particular joy that comes from temporary transformation, from the freedom to become someone or something else for a brief, magical evening. These outfits, some homemade with loving attention to detail, and others store-bought but modified with personal touches, speak of the importance of imagination in daily life, of the understanding that play and creativity are not luxuries but necessities that feed the soul and strengthen family bonds. The rain outside has settled into the kind of steady rhythm that makes indoor activities feel not just appropriate but necessary, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of quiet exploration that reveals the true value of preserved memories. In this atmosphere of gentle enclosure, surrounded by evidence of celebrations past and future, the cyclical nature of human joy becomes apparent. The understanding that happiness is not a destination, but a series of moments carefully created and lovingly remembered. Glass jars and bottles, their contents long since used or evaporated, stand in neat rows on a shelf that once served as a home pharmacy. A collection of remedies and treatments that speak to an era when healing was often a domestic art practiced by women who understood the medicinal properties of common plants and household ingredients. The containers themselves, some bearing the embossed names of long-defunct pharmaceutical companies and others simple mason jars with handwritten labels, represent the understanding that health was maintained through attention to prevention as much as treatment of illness. Dried herbs, their potency diminished, but their aromatic ghosts still faintly present, rest in small cloth bags that once held the power to soothe headaches, calm upset stomachs, and promote restful sleep. Lavender sachets, their purple flowers now gray with age, still carry the faint suggestion of their original fragrance, reminding visitors of the understanding that healing involves not just physical treatment, but the creation of environments that promote peace and well-being. These simple preparations speak to the wisdom of using what nature provides, of understanding the body's needs and responding with gentle, time-tested remedies. Recipe cards for home remedies, written in the careful script of women who took seriously their role as family healers, provide instructions for treatments that combined practical knowledge with loving care. Honey and lemon for sore throats, chamomile tea for sleeplessness, warm compresses for aches and pains. These simple preparations represent the understanding that healing often requires nothing more complex than attention, patience, and the application of gentle, natural remedies that work with the body's own healing processes, rather than against them. Medicine bottles, their dark glass designed to protect light-sensitive contents, bear labels that speak to an era when pharmacists compounded individual prescriptions and doctors made house calls when medical care was a personal relationship rather than an institutional transaction. These containers, carefully saved because glass was too valuable to discard and might be needed again, represent the frugality that came not from poverty, but from the understanding that waste was a form of disrespect for the resources that sustained life. The steady rhythm of rain against the attic windows creates an atmosphere that seems perfectly suited to the contemplation of these gentle healing arts, these domestic wisdoms that understood health to be a state of harmony between body, mind, and environment. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of care given and received, the value of simple remedies and patient attention becomes apparent. The understanding that healing often requires nothing more than time, rest, and the loving attention of those who care. Toys from bygone eras rest in careful arrangement, their surfaces worn smooth by small hands that once found in them gateways to imagination and adventure. A wooden rocking horse, his painted spots faded but his carved features still noble, stands ready to carry young riders on journeys limited only by the boundaries of childhood dreams. His leather saddle, cracked with age but still serviceable, bears the impressions of countless adventures, of children who understood that the best transportation was powered not by engines, but by imagination. Dolls of various vintages occupy their own special corner, their faces showing the particular wear patterns that come from being truly loved rather than merely collected. Porcelain heads with painted features rest on cloth bodies that have been mended and remended, evidence of the understanding that beloved companions deserve whatever care is necessary to keep them whole and present. Their clothes, some original and others created by loving hands, from scraps and remnants, speak to the importance of maintaining dignity and beauty, even in the world of play. Building blocks, their wooden surfaces polished by decades of handling, rest in boxes that have themselves become part of the play experience. Containers that could be transformed into houses, cars, or boats, depending on the needs of the moment. These simple geometric shapes represent the understanding that the best toys are those that provide frameworks for creativity rather than predetermined outcomes, tools that support imagination rather than replacing it with pre-programmed entertainment. Books designed specifically for young readers occupy their own shelf, their bright illustrations still vivid despite the passage of time. These volumes, chosen not just for their stories but for their ability to inspire and educate, represent the understanding that childhood is a time for filling minds with beautiful images and noble ideas, for creating foundations of knowledge and wonder that will support lifelong learning and growth. The wear patterns on these books, certain pages open more frequently than others, favored illustrations traced by small fingers, tell stories of preferences and passions, of young minds discovering the particular kinds of beauty that would shape their adult understanding of the world. The rain outside continues its gentle percussion, creating a soundtrack that seems designed specifically for the contemplation of childhood and the toys that once brought such joy to young hearts. In this atmosphere of quiet reflection, surrounded by evidence of play and imagination, the importance of preserving wonder becomes apparent. The understanding that the capacity for joy and creativity developed in childhood provides the foundation for a lifetime of meaningful engagement with the world. Pressed flowers and leaves, carefully preserved between sheets of waxed paper and stored in albums that document the changing seasons, create a botanical record of years spent in careful observation of natural beauty. Each specimen, selected not for rarity, but for the particular moment of perfection it represented, speaks to the understanding that beauty is often ephemeral and therefore deserving of special attention and preservation. The colors, though faded, still suggest the original vibrancy that caught the collector's eye. The deep red of autumn maples, the delicate pink of spring cherry blossoms, the sunny yellow of summer wildflowers. Garden journals, their pages filled with careful notations about planting dates, weather patterns, and the success or failure of various horticultural experiments, provide evidence of the patient attention required to create and maintain beauty in the natural world. These records, kept with the dedication of scientific researchers, but motivated by love rather than professional obligation, show the deep satisfaction that comes from working in partnership with natural processes, of understanding that the most beautiful gardens are those that work with rather than against the tendencies of soil, climate, and season. Seed packets, their bright illustrations, promising abundance and beauty, rest in careful organization that speaks to the optimism inherent in gardening, the faith that small actions taken in the present will produce rewards in the future. Some packets are empty, their contents having fulfilled their promise in gardens now return to earth, while others remain sealed, their potential still waiting for the right moment, the perfect conditions, the necessary attention that will transform possibility into reality. Photographs of gardens in various stages of development document the patient process of creating outdoor beauty, showing the progression from bare earth to established landscape through seasons of careful tending and gradual growth. These images capture not just the final results, but the process itself. The satisfaction of soil preparation, the hope of new plantings, the pride of successful harvest. They speak to the understanding that gardening is not just about producing beauty or food, but about participating in the fundamental processes of growth and renewal that sustain all life. The rain outside, so essential to the gardens documented in these preserved records, continues its gentle contribution to the cycle of growth and renewal that makes all beauty possible. The sound creates a connection between the preserved memories of past gardens and the ongoing reality of natural processes, reminding visitors that the same rain that falls today once nourished the flowers and vegetables that brought such joy to those who tended them with such care and attention. Party decorations from celebrations long past rest in careful storage, their bright colors and festive designs speaking to the understanding that joy deserves special recognition, that the marking of important moments requires attention to beauty and ceremony that elevates ordinary time into something memorable and meaningful. Crepe paper streamers, their folds still crisp despite decades of storage, wait to transform ordinary rooms into spaces of celebration, to create environments that announce the importance of the occasions they honor. Birthday candles, their wax surfaces still smooth and their wicks still ready for lighting, represent the accumulated years of family celebrations, of moments when the passage of time was marked not with regret, but with gratitude for life lived and love shared. These simple objects, so small and inexpensive yet so essential to the ritual of celebration, speak to the understanding that meaning is often found not in grand gestures but in small traditions, carefully maintained and lovingly repeated. Wedding favors and mementos from various family celebrations create a collection that documents the expansion and connection of family networks through marriage and partnership. These small gifts, chosen to commemorate specific moments of joy and commitment, speak to the understanding that celebration is not complete until it has been shared, that happiness multiplies when it is distributed among those who care enough to witness and remember important moments. Anniversary cards and Valentines, their sentimental messages speaking the language of love in the formal phrases of their era, provide evidence of relationships maintained through attention to the small gestures that keep affection alive and visible. These expressions of love, saved long after their occasions have passed, speak to the understanding that romantic feeling requires cultivation and expression. Recipe boxes, their surfaces worn smooth by decades of kitchen use, contain the accumulated wisdom of family cooks who understood that feeding people was an act of love, requiring both skill and intuition. The cards within, some typed on machines that required effort for each letter, and others written in the flowing script of hands that moved with confidence across paper, represent not just instructions for food preparation, but documentation of family preferences, seasonal celebrations, and the particular combinations of ingredients that could transform simple meals into expressions of care and hospitality. Handwritten recipes bear the marks of actual use, flour fingerprints that have become permanent parts of the cards, grease stains that speak of dishes prepared countless times, margin notes that record successful modifications or remind the cook of particular preferences among family members. These annotations, added over years of cooking experience, transform simple ingredient lists into personal documents that capture the evolution of family tastes and the accumulated wisdom that comes from understanding how food brings people together around shared tables and common experiences. Cookbook collections, their spines showing the wear patterns of frequent consultation, represent the desire to expand culinary horizons while maintaining connection to traditional preparations that anchored family identity in familiar flavors and cherished customs. Some volumes fall open automatically to pages that were consulted most frequently, their bindings broken at the points where favorite recipes resided, their margins filled with notes that record successful experiments and cautionary reminders about techniques that required particular attention or timing. Canning jars, their glass surfaces clouded with age but their potential for preservation undiminished, speak to an era when food security required personal attention to the processes of growing, harvesting, and storing the ingredients that would sustain families through seasons when fresh produce was unavailable. These containers, carefully saved because their utility extended far beyond single use, represent the understanding that true economy comes from making the most of abundance when it appears, preserving plenty against times of scarcity. The rain outside creates the perfect atmosphere for contemplating these domestic arts. Its steady rhythm reminiscent of the patient processes required for successful cooking and preservation. The sound suggests the kind of unhurried attention that produces the best results in kitchen work. The understanding that good food cannot be rushed, but must be allowed to develop through the application of time, heat, and careful attention to the subtle changes that indicate readiness and completion. Religious artifacts and devotional materials occupy their own quiet corner, their arrangement speaking to the understanding that spiritual life requires both private contemplation and community participation, both personal reflection and shared ritual. Prayer books, their pages soft from frequent handling, bear the marks of regular use. Certain passages opened more frequently than others, favorite prayers marked with ribbons that have faded from bright colors to gentle pastels, margins filled with penciled notes that record particular intentions or moments of special significance, rosaries and prayer beads, their surfaces polished smooth by countless repetitions of familiar prayers, rest in small boxes lined with silk that has aged to the color of old ivory. These tools of meditation speak to the understanding that spiritual practice benefits from physical anchors, from objects that engage the senses while the mind focuses on higher concerns. The wear patterns on these beads tell stories of hands that found comfort in familiar motions, of prayers repeated until they became as natural as breathing, as automatic as heartbeat. Religious artwork, from simple prints to elaborate needlework samplers featuring biblical verses, creates a gallery of inspiration that speaks to the desire to surround daily life with reminders of spiritual truth and moral guidance. These images, chosen not for their artistic merit but for their ability to inspire and comfort, represent the understanding that environment influences thought and behavior, that the conscious creation of sacred space supports the development of sacred consciousness. Hymnals and sheet music for religious songs provide evidence of households where faith was expressed, not just through prayer and study, but through the lifting of voices in songs of praise and thanksgiving. The pages, worn from use and marked with penciled notes about tempo and harmony, Speak to the understanding that music has the power to elevate ordinary moments into experiences of transcendence, to create community through shared melody and rhythm. The rain continues its gentle percussion against the attic windows, creating a natural soundtrack for spiritual contemplation that seems to wash away the distractions of ordinary concern and create space for deeper reflection. In this atmosphere of quiet reverence, surrounded by evidence of faith lived daily rather than reserved for special occasions, the importance of spiritual practice becomes apparent. The understanding that meaning and purpose require cultivation through regular attention to questions and concerns that transcend immediate circumstances. School books and educational materials create a library of learning that spans generations of family members who understood education to be not just preparation for earning a living, but development of the mind and character necessary for full participation in human culture and community. Textbooks, their covers worn, but their contents still relevant, speak to an era when knowledge was presented as cumulative wisdom rather than disposable information. When students were expected to master fundamental concepts that would serve as foundations for lifelong learning and growth. Penmanship practice books, their pages filled with careful repetitions of letters and words, represent the understanding that clear communication requires attention to form as well as content, that the physical act of writing well demonstrates respect for both the message being conveyed and the person who will receive it. The progression from tentative first attempts to confident final exercises documents the patient process of skill development. The understanding that mastery comes through practice rather than inspiration. Report cards and school certificates, carefully preserved as evidence of achievement and progress, speak to families that valued education, not just for its practical benefits, but for its role in character development and social responsibility. These documents, with their careful notations about deportment as well as academic performance, represent an educational philosophy that understood learning to involve the whole person rather than just the accumulation of facts and skills. School photographs and class pictures create a visual record of educational communities where learning took place in the context of relationships and shared experiences. These images, showing students in their best clothes and most formal poses, capture moments when education was understood to be a privilege, requiring appropriate respect and attention, when the opportunity to learn was valued as preparation for citizenship and service rather than merely personal advancement. The rain outside provides a soundtrack that seems perfectly suited to the contemplation of learning and growth, its steady rhythm reminiscent of the patient repetition required for true mastery of any subject or skill. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of education pursued with dedication and purpose, the value of learning becomes apparent not as means to an end, but as an end in itself, a way of engaging with the world that enriches every aspect of human experience. Jewelry boxes and accessories containers hold treasures that speak to the understanding that personal appearance is a form of self-expression and respect for others, that the way one presents oneself to the world communicates values and intentions as clearly as words or actions. Brooches and pins, their designs ranging from simple geometric patterns to elaborate floral arrangements, represent an era when clothing was considered incomplete without the addition of decorative elements that reflected personal taste and attention to detail. Earrings, from simple pearl studs to elaborate chandelier designs, rest in compartments lined with velvet that has faded from deep purple to soft lavender. These accessories speak to the understanding that beauty is found in details, that the careful selection of appropriate adornment can transform ordinary appearance into something approaching elegance. The variety of styles represented suggests a wardrobe that could adapt to different occasions and moods, from everyday simplicity to special occasion glamour. Hair accessories, from simple combs to elaborate decorative pieces designed for special occasions, represent the understanding that hair arrangement was an important aspect of personal presentation, requiring both skill and appropriate tools. Hairpins and bobby pins, their surfaces dulled by use but their function unimpaired, speak to daily routines that involved careful attention to appearance as a form of self-respect and consideration for others who would encounter the results of these grooming efforts. Perfume bottles, their contents long evaporated, but their crystal surfaces still catching light like tiny prisms, represent the understanding that scent is a powerful form of personal expression, capable of creating atmosphere and evoking memory in ways that visual elements cannot achieve. These containers, some simple and others elaborate works of decorative art, speak to the importance of engaging multiple senses in the creation of personal presence and the maintenance of feminine mystery and allure. The rain continues its gentle conversation with the attic windows, creating an atmosphere of privacy that makes the examination of these personal items feel like participation in intimate rituals of self-care and presentation. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of attention to beauty and personal dignity, the importance of taking care with one's appearance becomes apparent, not as vanity, but as respect for oneself and others, as understanding that how we present ourselves to the world is a form of communication that deserves the same careful attention we give to our words and actions. Household management guides and domestic science manuals create a library of practical wisdom that speaks to an era when running a home was understood to be a complex skill, requiring knowledge of everything from nutrition and budgeting to cleaning techniques and social etiquette. These volumes, their pages marked with use and their margins filled with personal notes and modifications, represent the understanding that domestic work, properly approached, is both art and science, requiring creativity and knowledge in equal measure. Home remedy collections and housekeeping tips, carefully copied into personal notebooks, document the accumulated wisdom of women who understood that maintaining a comfortable home required resourcefulness and the ability to solve problems with whatever materials were available. These practical solutions, tested through use and refined through experience, speak to an era when self-sufficiency was not a lifestyle choice, but a necessity, when the ability to make do and make better was essential to family welfare and comfort. Budget books and household account ledgers provide evidence of families that understood financial security to require careful attention to income and expenses, patient planning for future needs, and the wisdom to distinguish between wants and necessities. These records, kept with the precision of business accounts but motivated by love rather than profit, show the daily decisions and small sacrifices that created the foundation for family stability and security. Entertaining guides and etiquette manuals speak to the understanding that hospitality is both privilege and responsibility, requiring knowledge of proper procedures and genuine desire to create comfort and pleasure for guests. These volumes, with their detailed instructions for everything from table setting to conversation topics, represent the understanding that social interaction, properly managed, strengthens community bonds and creates opportunities for the kind of meaningful connection that enriches all participants. The rain outside continues its steady presence, creating the perfect atmosphere for contemplating these domestic arts and the wisdom they represent. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of homes managed with skill and attention, the value of domestic knowledge becomes apparent not as limitation, but as empowerment, not as burden, but as opportunity to create environments that support and nurture the people we love most. Steamer trunks and travel cases, their surfaces bearing the accumulated stickers and labels of journeys to distant places, speak to an era when travel was an undertaking requiring careful planning, and the understanding that adventure often involved discomfort, willingly accepted in exchange for the expansion of experience and understanding. These sturdy containers, built to withstand the rigors of railway baggage cars and ocean voyage holds, represent the faith that exploration of the wider world was worth whatever difficulties the journey might present. Postcards from exotic destinations create a visual diary of places visited and wonders witnessed, their brief messages capturing the excitement of discovery and the desire to share new experiences with those left behind. The images, though faded, still convey the sense of marvel that comes from encountering landscapes and cultures different from one's own familiar surroundings. These small rectangles of cardboard represent the understanding that travel is not complete until it has been shared, that the joy of discovery multiplies when it is communicated to others who care about the traveler's experiences and safe return. Travel journals, their pages filled with careful observations about foreign customs, unusual foods, and remarkable sights, provide evidence of minds that approached new experiences with curiosity rather than judgment, with the desire to understand rather than merely to observe. These personal records, written in fountain pen ink that has aged from black to sepia, capture not just the external details of places visited, but the internal process of growth and change that comes from stepping outside familiar boundaries and comfortable assumptions. Maps and guidebooks, their pages marked with planned routes and penciled notes about recommended sites and accommodations, speak to the careful preparation that once preceded any significant journey. These planning documents, worn from use and consultation, represent the understanding that successful travel requires research and forethought, that the best adventures are those that balance careful preparation with openness to unexpected opportunities and unplanned discoveries. The rain outside creates a soundtrack that makes the examination of these travel artifacts feel like participation in the adventures they represent. Its steady rhythm, reminiscent of train wheels on tracks or ship engines, maintaining steady progress toward distant destinations. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of curiosity about the wider world, the value of travel becomes apparent not as escape from ordinary life, but as enrichment of it, not as rejection of home, but as deeper appreciation for the place one chooses to return to after experiencing the alternatives the world offers. Art supplies and creative materials rest in boxes and portfolios that speak to the understanding that artistic expression is not luxury, but necessity, not frivolity, but essential nourishment for the human spirit. Watercolor sets, their pigments dried, but their potential for beauty undiminished, represent moments when ordinary people felt compelled to capture and preserve the beauty they encountered in daily life. The brushes, their bristles stiff with age, but their capacity for creating beauty intact, speak to hands that understood art to be not about achieving perfection, but about paying attention to the world with sufficient care to want to preserve and share what they saw. Sketchbooks and drawing pads contain the visual diary of eyes that found beauty in commonplace subjects. Garden flowers rendered with careful attention to the play of light and shadow. Portraits of family members captured in moments of unself-conscious grace. Landscapes that speak to the particular affection that comes from intimate knowledge of familiar places. These drawings, executed with varying degrees of technical skill but uniform sincerity of purpose, represent the understanding that artistic ability is less important than artistic intention, that the desire to create beauty is itself a form of prayer and praise. Craft supplies and hobby materials speak to the understanding that creativity takes many forms, that the impulse to make something beautiful and useful can be satisfied through activities ranging from needlework to woodworking to the patient assembly of collections that bring order and meaning to the accumulation of beautiful objects. These materials, organized with the care of professional artists but motivated by love rather than commerce, represent the understanding that everyone possesses creative capacity that deserves cultivation and expression. Musical instruments from simple harmonicas to elaborate parlor organs provide evidence of households where music was understood to be essential to complete human development, where the ability to create beauty through sound was valued as highly as any other skill or accomplishment. These instruments, their surfaces worn smooth by frequent use, speak to evening entertainments when families created their own amusement, when the ability to sing or play was not professional requirement but personal enrichment that enhanced the quality of daily life. The rain continues its gentle percussion against the attic windows, creating a natural accompaniment that makes the contemplation of these artistic artifacts feel like participation in the creative process they represent. In this atmosphere of quiet inspiration, surrounded by evidence of creativity, pursued for its own sake, rather than for external reward, the importance of artistic expression becomes apparent as fundamental human need, as essential to complete living as food and shelter and love. Baby books and memory albums document the careful attention paid to preserving the details of early life, the understanding that childhood passes so quickly that its precious moments must be captured and preserved before they fade into the general blur of accumulated experience. These volumes, their pages filled with careful notations about first words, first steps, and other developmental milestones, represent the faith that these small details will someday matter to the children themselves, that the evidence of being loved and watched and celebrated will provide foundation for adult confidence and security. First teeth and locks of hair, preserved in small envelopes, marked with dates and circumstances, speak to the understanding that physical growth involves a series of losses as well as gains, that the baby who is disappearing into the child deserves commemoration and gentle mourning. These tiny artifacts, so small as to seem insignificant yet preserved with the care reserved for precious relics, represent the particular poignancy that comes from watching those we love change and grow beyond our ability to protect and contain them. School artwork and early attempts at writing create a gallery of developing skill and emerging personality, showing the progression from tentative first marks to confident expressions of individual vision and voice. These creations, saved not for their artistic merit, but for their evidence of growth and effort, speak to families that understood encouragement to be more important than criticism, that valued process more highly than product. that recognized potential more clearly than current limitation. Toys and games from various stages of childhood development. Create a museum of play that documents the evolution of interests and abilities, the way children naturally progress from simple to complex activities as their minds and bodies mature. These playthings, worn smooth by countless hours of imaginative use, speak to the understanding that play is not frivolous activity, but essential work, not waste of time, but investment in the development of creativity, problem-solving ability, and social skills that will serve throughout life. The rain outside provides the perfect soundtrack for contemplating these childhood treasures, its gentle rhythm reminiscent of the patient attention required to nurture young lives through the stages of growth and development. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of childhood carefully observed and lovingly preserved, the importance of paying attention to the small moments becomes apparent. The understanding that the quality of attention we give to those we love creates the foundation for their lifelong sense of worth and belonging. Church bulletins and community newsletters create a record of participation in the larger world beyond family boundaries. Evidence of understanding that individual welfare is connected to community health, that personal happiness is enhanced by contribution to shared endeavors and common goals. These publications, their pages yellowed, but their messages of fellowship and mutual support still relevant, speak to an era when community involvement was understood to be both privilege and responsibility, both opportunity and obligation. Club meeting minutes and organization records document the patient work of building and maintaining the institutions that create civilized society. The understanding that democracy requires active participation rather than passive consumption of benefits created by others' efforts. These documents, kept with the precision of legal records, but motivated by civic pride rather than professional obligation, show the daily decisions and small contributions that create the foundation for community stability and progress. Volunteer schedules and charity work records provide evidence of the understanding that those who have been blessed with abundance have corresponding obligations to share their good fortune with those less fortunate. These simple lists and schedules, documenting hours spent in service to others, speak to the faith that individual actions, however small, contribute to the larger work of creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to experience dignity and hope. Social correspondence and community announcements create a network of connection that shows how individual families were woven into the larger fabric of neighborhood and town life, how personal celebrations and sorrows were shared among circles of friends and acquaintances who understood that joy multiplies when shared, and sorrow diminishes when distributed among caring hearts, willing to offer comfort and support. The rain continues its steady presence, creating an atmosphere that makes the examination of these community artifacts feel like participation in the social connections they represent. In this quiet space, surrounded by evidence of lives lived in conscious relationship with others, the importance of community involvement becomes apparent not as burden, but as blessing, not as limitation, but as expansion of the possibilities for meaning and purpose that come from understanding oneself, to be part of something larger and more enduring than individual existence. As the afternoon rain continues its gentle conversation with the attic windows, the accumulated treasures of grandmother's sanctuary seem to settle into even deeper peace, their stories having been witnessed and their significance acknowledged through careful attention and respectful contemplation. The light filtering through the rain-streaked glass has grown softer, more golden, suggesting the approach of evening and the natural conclusion of this journey through preserved memory and accumulated wisdom. Reading materials designed for quiet contemplation, poetry collections, devotional readings, and philosophical reflections occupy a special place near the window where the best light falls, their pages marked with ribbons and pressed flowers that served as bookmarks for passages that provided particular comfort or inspiration. These volumes, chosen not for entertainment but for their ability to elevate thought and feeling, speak to the understanding that the mind, like the body, requires nourishment of the highest quality, that what we choose to read shapes not just our knowledge, but our character and our capacity for wisdom and compassion. Evening journals and reflection notebooks document the practice of ending each day with conscious consideration of its events and lessons, with gratitude for its blessings, an honest acknowledgement of its failures and disappointments. These private records, written in the quiet hours when the day's work was done and the household settled into rest, represent the understanding that an examined life is richer than an unreflective one, that the practice of regular self-examination creates the foundation for growth and positive change. Meditation aids and contemplative objects, smooth stones worn by handling, small religious statues polished by countless touches, prayer beads whose surfaces have been transformed by years of use, speak to the human need for physical anchors during spiritual practice, for objects that engage the senses while the mind focuses on concerns that transcend immediate circumstances. These simple tools, chosen not for their monetary value, but for their ability to facilitate inner peace and spiritual connection, represent the understanding that the sacred can be found in the most ordinary materials when they are approached with appropriate reverence and attention. The rain outside has settled into the kind of steady, peaceful rhythm that makes indoor contemplation feel not just appropriate but necessary, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of quiet reflection that reveals the true value of preserved memories and accumulated wisdom. In this atmosphere of gentle enclosure surrounded by evidence of lives lived with attention to beauty, meaning, and connection. The importance of creating spaces for reflection becomes apparent. The understanding that peace is not something that happens to us, but something we must consciously create through the choices we make about how to spend our time and attention. As this gentle exploration of grandmother's attic draws toward its natural conclusion, the treasures discovered here seem to whisper their final lessons about the importance of preserving what matters, of paying attention to the small details that create the foundation for meaningful existence, of understanding that the quality of our attention to life determines the quality of life itself. The rain continues its blessing, washing the world clean and creating the perfect soundtrack for dreams that will carry forward the wisdom discovered in this peaceful sanctuary where memory and hope reside together in perfect harmony. As the afternoon light begins its gentle transition toward evening, the attic takes on an even more ethereal quality. The rain-filtered sunlight casting everything in soft, golden hues that seem to emanate from within the objects themselves rather than falling upon them from outside. In this transformed light, a collection of dream journals and sleep-related artifacts reveals itself in a corner that had remained shadowed during the brighter hours of exploration, as if these most intimate treasures had been waiting for the proper moment of quiet reverence to make themselves known. Dream diaries, their pages filled with the careful recording of nighttime visions and subconscious wanderings, speak to minds that understood sleep to be not merely rest, but journey, not empty time, but rich experience, deserving of attention and interpretation. The handwriting in these volumes changes subtly from entry to entry, sometimes flowing with the fluid grace of easy recollection, other times struggling with the difficulty of capturing in words experiences that existed beyond the boundaries of ordinary language and logical sequence. Sleep sachets and pillows filled with lavender, chamomile, and other herbs known for their calming properties rest in a cedar chest whose aromatic interior still carries the faint suggestion of the botanicals once stored within. These gentle sleep aids speak to the understanding that rest is not something that can be commanded, but must be courted. That the transition from waking consciousness to peaceful slumber requires preparation and the creation of conditions that invite, rather than demand, the surrender of conscious control. Bedtime story collections, their pages soft from countless readings, contain the tales that once carried young minds gently from the bright alertness of day into the mysterious realm of sleep and dreams. These volumes, chosen not for their literary merit, but for their ability to soothe and comfort, represent the understanding that the last thoughts of the day shape the quality of the night's rest, that minds filled with beautiful images and peaceful stories create the foundation for restorative sleep and pleasant dreams. The rain outside has settled into its most gentle rhythm, a barely audible whisper against the windows that seems designed specifically to encourage the kind of deep relaxation that leads naturally to peaceful sleep. In this atmosphere of perfect tranquility, surrounded by artifacts that speak to the importance of honoring both sleep and dreams, the attic itself seems to become a dream, a place where the boundaries between waking and sleeping, between memory and imagination, between past and present, dissolve into the kind of peaceful unity that characterizes the most restorative rest. In the deepest corner of the attic, where the slanted roof creates the most intimate space, a collection of memorial items rests in quiet dignity, their presence speaking not of sadness, but of love so deep that it transcends the boundaries of physical existence. These artifacts of remembrance, carefully preserved and tenderly maintained, represent the understanding that those we love never truly leave us, but continue to influence and inspire through the memories they have created and the love they have shared. Funeral programs and memorial cards, their formal language, unable to contain the full measure of lives lived with purpose and meaning, serve as official records of celebrations that honored the completion of earthly journeys and the beginning of whatever comes next. These simple documents, preserved not for their informational content, but for their connection to moments of profound significance, speak to the human need to mark transitions with ceremony and to create tangible reminders of intangible love. Sympathy cards and letters of condolence, their messages of comfort and support, written in the careful language of those who understand that words are inadequate to the task of healing grief, but necessary nonetheless, create a record of community response to loss and the understanding that sorrow shared is sorrow diminished. These expressions of care, saved long after their immediate comfort was needed, represent the lasting value of human compassion and the importance of reaching out to others in their times of greatest need. Memory books and tribute albums, their pages filled with photographs, stories, and personal remembrances contributed by family and friends, document lives that touched others in meaningful ways, that created ripples of influence extending far beyond their immediate circles. These collaborative memorials speak to the understanding that no life exists in isolation, that we are all connected through webs of relationship and influence that continue long after physical presence has ended. The rain continues its gentle blessing, creating a soundtrack that seems perfectly suited to the contemplation of life's deepest mysteries and most profound truths. In this atmosphere of peaceful acceptance, surrounded by evidence of love that transcends physical boundaries, the fear of endings dissolves into understanding that what matters most, love, memory, influence, connection, continues beyond the limitations of individual existence, creating a form of immortality that requires no faith beyond the evidence of our own experience of being loved and loving in return. As the exploration of grandmother's attic nears its gentle conclusion, the accumulated treasures seem to arrange themselves into a pattern that speaks to the cyclical nature of human experience, the way individual lives participate in larger rhythms of growth, maturity, decline, and renewal that connect us to the fundamental processes that govern all existence. The rain outside has become so soft as to be almost imaginary, a presence felt more than heard, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of deep understanding that comes only in moments of complete peace and receptive silence. Calendars from many years, their pages marked with the small notations that recorded the rhythm of family life. Birthdays and anniversaries, appointments and obligations, seasonal celebrations, and personal milestones create a record of time not as abstract measurement but as lived experience, as the framework within which love and work and hope and sorrow played out their eternal dance. These simple records, saved long after their practical usefulness had ended, speak to the understanding that time's true value lies not in its passage, but in what we choose to do with the moments we are given. Seasonal decorations, now revealed in their full array as the afternoon light shifts and changes, show the careful attention paid to marking the passage of natural cycles, the understanding that human happiness is enhanced by conscious participation in the larger rhythms that govern the natural world. Spring flowers and summer fruits, autumn leaves and winter evergreens, each season's symbols, carefully preserved and annually renewed, speak to the faith that change is not loss, but transformation, that endings are also beginnings, that what appears to die returns in new forms. Garden seeds, some planted and some still waiting in their packets for the right moment and conditions, represent the eternal optimism that drives human endeavor, the faith that small actions taken in the present will produce abundance in the future. These tiny repositories of potential, so small as to seem insignificant, yet containing within themselves the power to produce beauty and nourishment, speak to the mystery of growth and the miracle of renewal that makes all hope possible. The rain outside seems to be blessing not just the attic and its treasures, but the entire cycle of growth and renewal that these artifacts represent, the eternal dance of seasons and generations that connects each individual life to the larger patterns that give existence meaning and purpose. In this moment of perfect understanding, surrounded by evidence of lives lived in harmony with natural rhythms and eternal truths, the fear of change dissolves into acceptance. The anxiety about endings transforms into appreciation for the privilege of participation in something infinitely larger and more beautiful than individual existence. As the golden afternoon light continues its gentle transformation toward evening, the attic reveals its final and perhaps most precious treasure, the accumulated wisdom that emerges not from any single artifact, but from the totality of what has been preserved and shared, the understanding that comes from witnessing evidence of lives lived with attention to what matters most. This wisdom, invisible yet unmistakable, permeates the space like the faint fragrance of dried flowers, or the subtle warmth of sunlight filtered through rain-washed windows. The lesson of attention emerges clearly from every carefully preserved item, every lovingly maintained collection, every thoughtfully organized display. These artifacts speak to the understanding that the quality of our attention to life determines the quality of life itself, that what we choose to notice and preserve and celebrate shapes not only our own experience, but the experience of those who will inherit our choices and benefit from our care. The lesson of connection reveals itself in the letters and photographs, the community records and family celebrations, the evidence of lives lived in conscious relationship with others. These materials demonstrate that individual happiness is inseparable from the health of our relationships. That meaning comes not from what we accomplish alone, but from what we create together, from the love we give and receive, from the ways we choose to participate in the larger human community. The lesson of continuity emerges from the careful preservation of traditions and customs, the passing down of recipes and remedies, the maintenance of celebrations and observances that connect each generation to those who came before and those who will come after. These practices speak to the understanding that we are not isolated individuals, but links in a chain of being that extends backward into history and forward into possibility, that our choices and actions contribute to something larger and more enduring than our individual existence. The rain outside has become the gentlest whisper, barely audible, but still present, still blessing, still creating the perfect conditions for the kind of deep peace that allows true understanding to emerge. In this atmosphere of complete tranquility, surrounded by evidence of wisdom lived rather than merely studied, the most important truths reveal themselves not as abstract concepts, but as practical realities, as ways of being in the world that create meaning and purpose and joy, not through grand gestures, but through daily choices to pay attention, to connect, to preserve what matters, to participate fully in the great gift of existence. As this gentle journey through grandmother's attic draws to its natural close, the space itself seems to exhale a deep sigh of satisfaction, as if the treasures stored here have been waiting for exactly this kind of careful attention, this respectful witnessing, this loving acknowledgement of their significance and beauty. The rain outside has become so soft as to be almost imaginary, a presence that exists at the very edge of perception, creating the perfect soundtrack for the kind of deep peace that settles over the soul like a blessing. The afternoon light, filtered through rain-washed windows and transformed by its passage through this sanctuary of memory, seems to have achieved a quality of timelessness that makes the present moment feel eternal, as if this exploration could continue forever without ever becoming tedious or repetitive, as if there would always be new treasures to discover, new stories to uncover, new wisdom to absorb from the accumulated evidence of lives lived with attention and care. In this perfect moment of peace and understanding, the boundaries between visitor and visited, between present and past, between memory and reality, seem to dissolve into a unity that encompasses everything that has been discovered and contemplated during this gentle afternoon of exploration. The treasures of the attic become not just objects to be observed, but experiences to be lived. Not just artifacts from the past, but invitations to create similar beauty and meaning in the present. The rain continues its blessing, so gentle now as to be felt rather than heard, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of deep rest that comes not from exhaustion, but from satisfaction, not from emptiness, but from fullness, not from the absence of thought, but from the presence of peace. In this atmosphere of complete tranquility, surrounded by evidence of love and care and attention to beauty, the soul settles into the kind of profound rest that restores not just the body, but the spirit, that prepares not just for sleep, but for dreams, that creates not just peace, but joy. As consciousness begins its gentle drift toward the realm of sleep and dreams, the treasures of grandmother's attic seem to whisper their final blessing, that life is beautiful when lived with attention, that love is the only treasure that multiplies when shared, that what we preserve and pass on to others becomes our truest form of immortality. The rain outside continues its gentle benediction, washing the world clean and creating the perfect conditions for the kind of peaceful sleep that comes to those who have spent their time well, who have paid attention to beauty, who have opened their hearts to the wisdom that emerges when we take time to truly see and appreciate the gifts that surround us always, waiting only for the kind of gentle attention that transforms ordinary moments into sacred experiences. In this perfect peace, surrounded by love, made visible through careful preservation and thoughtful arrangement. Sleep comes not as escape from life, but as deeper participation in its mysteries, not as ending, but as transformation, not as darkness, but as the gentle twilight that prepares the soul for dreams filled with all the beauty and wisdom and love that has been discovered in this sacred space where memory and hope reside together in perfect harmony, blessed by the eternal rain that falls softly on all who seek shelter in the sanctuary of love, carefully preserved and generously shared.